new policy in language instruction. For some of you that are in the know, this is pretty controversial. I don't know much details, but there's a lot of buzz around the Philippines, and some people think it's good, some people think it's not good. Some people say, where are the resources coming from? So Lisa Burton is going to talk to us about that. Now, Lisa is a PhD candidate. In 10 days from now or so, she's going to defend her thesis and become a PhD. She's a school teacher and taught here in the Twin Cities area. And then she and her husband joined the Peace Corps, and she worked with the Department of Education with program evaluation and that kind of teacher training. So she's had a lot of experience in the Philippines, and she's very much dedicated to education in the Philippines. So it'd be my pleasure to introduce Lisa.
Thank you. Magandang hapon po sa inyong lahat. I will be doing the rest of my presentation in English. But it's very nice to be here and to see all of you. As Paul mentioned, the Philippines is very near and dear to my heart. It is in 2003, my husband and I got a phone call. We had known that we wanted to do Peace Corps, and we got a phone call, and they said, well, how do you feel about going to the Philippines? And so we didn't know very much about the Philippines, but we immediately started reading, and we got excited, and we were just blown away by the people that we met there and that we call friends today. For their hospitality and just their kindness, and so we have so many good friends in the Philippines that we still keep in touch with, and that I was able to go back in June and July of last year to visit. So what as Paul also mentioned, I'm finishing my PhD at the University of Minnesota, and my research for my PhD has been on the language policy in the Philippines and their shift towards mother tongue. So I'm much more acclimated with the language policy than with the K-12, but by default, I have learned about K-12 along the way, and so I'll share with you what I know about that as well. But I'm going to start out with a couple of stories, and as I came today, I was remembering the very first presentation that I gave in the Philippines, and I thought that I was just going to be talking to a group of the teachers at the elementary school where I was working. But right before I was supposed to give my talk, they said, oh, well, you will start with a song. And I said, what? I have to sing? And they said, oh, yes, you have to sing. And so the only song that I could think of, and maybe you know it, is Tong 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 Paki Tong Ki Tong. And so that is the song that I sing. Tong 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 Paki Tong Ki Tong Alimango Sadagat. And little did I know, at the very same time, my husband was at the high school, and they told him that he had to sing. And would you guess he sang the exact same song? So I will not be starting out this presentation with a song, but that is fitting that I but my second thing is that I was always asked 3 questions when I would meet somebody new in the Philippines. And the very first question that I was asked always was, do you have kids? And the second question was, are you Catholic? And the third question, anybody know? Have you eaten? But more specifically, they said, do you eat rice? And so now I am going to return this, and I am going to ask you some questions. And I am going to make you work a little bit. And so I'm going to ask you to stand up if this statement describes you. Okay? So my first question is, stand up if you were born in the Philippines. Okay, thank you. And my second, stand up if you were born in the United States. You can sit down. Stand up if you were born in the United States. Thank you. Stand up if you were born in another country. Can you tell us where?
Canada.
Canada.
Pakistan.
And Pakistan. Oh, thank you. I was wondering if there would be anybody. Stand up if you have lived in or near Manila. Okay, thank you. Good. Stand up if you have lived in another part of Luzon. Stand up if you have lived in the Visayas. And stand up if you have lived in Mindanao. If you have never lived in the Philippines but you have visited there. Very good. And stand up if you have never been to the Philippines. Good, thank you. So we have a big array of experience with the Philippines here. And I'm going to make you work throughout the presentation, actually. So I will be asking you some questions to hear what you think. But the topic of my presentation is twofold. As you know, I'm going to be talking about the K-12 education policy and the language in education policy that's most recent. So my objective for what we are doing here today, I'm a school teacher, so I always have my objectives, is that I would hope that you will leave here having learned what the policy says, the rationale for why it is adopted, has been adopted, and what is happening at the local level, and the challenges of implementation. So, and then we'll open it up to questions at the end if you have other specific things that you would like to know. So, both the K-12 and the mother tongue-based multilingual education policy are embedded into one act. And this is the Enhanced Basic Education Act of 2012. So it has several components. The K-12 is one aspect of it, and the language policy is another aspect of it. So you can see that in the quote here. It's about strengthening its curriculum, which partly comes from the language aspect, and increasing the number of years. So even though the implementation for this has begun this last school year in 2012, it was not actually passed through Congress until very, very recently. So in November of just this last year, the House passed their rendition of the Enhanced Basic Education Act. And then the Senate, just in January, just a couple of months ago, they passed their version of the Basic Education Act. And so I believe it was around January 30th that they reconciled those two and have come up with their final version that is waiting for President Aquino to sign. So we're not sure when that will be, but what I have heard is that it's considered as good as passed right now, that implementation has begun and they're moving forward with it. So the aspect that I'll talk about first is K-12 education. So there's two key aspects here that are most obviously new. And the first is universal kindergarten, and the second is the addition of the 2 years for senior high school. So kindergarten, until this point, has not been a compulsory grade, but has been added now as a compulsory and as a universal opportunity for all students to attend this preparatory education aspect of their career. And then the senior high school was added at the end, so there's now a grade 11 and a grade 12 that will be phased in. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. So you're probably wondering, well, what are they going to do with these 2 extra years of education? And in the last 2 years of education, what is going to be happening is that students are going to be choosing a career track. And from what I've read, it sounds like they're going to be choosing it maybe around grade 9, grade 10. And their career track is going to be chosen based on their abilities, their aptitude, their interests, and then the school capacity for addressing these different areas. So then in the final 2 years of senior high school, there is a core curriculum that will include, the standard math, science, social sciences, and such. But then they will have very specific career pathways that they will have courses around. And so this may include, as I've noted up here. It may include a business track, a science track, humanities and science track, and those would be very university driven. So for students that are planning to attend university, those would be some of the core tracks that they would select. There's also, as you can see, a technical and vocational track. And what I find interesting about that is that students can actually earn a technical certificate, up to 2 certificates, while they are still in high school. So the rationale behind this is that students can leave high school having fully employable skills to enter into the workforce. This is the rationale behind it. Can you see this from the back? It's a little
Not
small.
very well.
Okay, I'll just talk it through. I wanted to show you this so that you see how implementation is going to be phased in. So if you look at the very top, 2011, 2012, that was the first year for universal kindergarten. But it was not until this last school year in 2012 that the implementation of the grade 1 began, and simultaneously implementation of grade 7 began. So last year it was only grade 1 and only grade 7 that were starting out. So I think this is a positive thing that it's being gradually phased in, right? Because there's a lot of planning and resource gathering that needs to happen. And so we're starting with just grade 1 and grade 7, and then with each year it will move up a grade. So next year it'll be 1 and 2 and 7 and 8. Okay? So you can see that by year 5, 2016, 2017, that is the first year that there will be a grade 11. So there's still 4 years, 3 years? How many years is that? 4 years until grade 11 and grade 12 actually occur. So the first year that you will have senior high school graduates would be in 2018, at the end of that year. Okay? And 2024 would be when the first batch that has gone through from grade 1 until the end would be graduating. Okay? So it's a many-year process to getting full implementation of this, and I know that the hope is that there will be a lot more planning and resource gathering and curriculum writing along the way to support this. So what is the rationale for it? Talked a little bit about it, but anybody have ideas? Why do you think they're doing this?
Well, just as you said, when they're done, they could be employable.
Mm-hmm.
They would have skills already.
Yeah.
They don't have to go to college for it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they want them to be more employable and be in the global market to
The global market.
have the,
Mhm.
be in the standard global market.
Yes. Yep.
So not so many people can just go and take something easy like BS Commerce to just try to fill out the next 4 years.
Mhm.
Like so many millions of kids seem to do.
Right.
Get them something more focused on, something practical.
Mhm. Other thoughts?
Alliance also the US.
Yeah. And other countries that have the 12-year system.
I think the Philippines would like to be like the rest of the countries in the world where they have those number of years of schooling for the students. Because our high school now before was only up to 4th year, so they added 2 more years, so
Right.
they become similar to the other countries offering those length of time.
Yep.
Another reason is that a lot of the schools are triple shift, and right now, in the Philippines, they spend more hours in school by grade 10 than we do by grade 12 here. And so if you decrease the amount of class time and spread it out over 12, it'll ease the pressure on schools.
Right.
I don't think they're planning. Is there any financial reason for this? Because I can see that some of the private schools will make a lot more money because then they're going to hold students 2 years more. And many Filipinos who can afford it do not send their kids to public schools.
Right.
They go to private schools. So that now the private schools will make more money.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
But
is it-
on the other hand, it's the universities, colleges offering college courses that will be affected because that means 2 years they will not be able to,
Yeah.
take in new students.
Right.
Because normally after 4th year, the students graduate and they enroll in colleges and universities. But with this new program, they have to wait 2 more years.
No, because the implementation is gradual. There's going to be a continuous flow.
Well, and I'll
It's
talk
not going to
about
be
that,
right
actually.
away. There's
No,
still
it
going to be
is.
flow.
It is, because my granddaughter is now grade 7, and she is expected to graduate.
Well, there are those challenges. We'll talk about the challenges in a little bit too. So, and if I don't talk about what will happen with the colleges, remind me, because I will mention what the plan is for that. We'll take one last comment and then we'll.
And I think going back to the rationale, I think by going K through 12, we will not anymore be the only country in Asia that has the basic 10 years.
Right, and I'm going to talk about that. I'm glad that you said that. So the 4 rationale that I have consistently heard and consistently seen relate to decongesting. This is a common word that is used. Decongesting the curriculum. They suggest that the curriculum as it is now is trying to encompass 12 years of education in a 10-year time span. And this is what is being stated by DepEd anyway, that they're trying to spread this out over 12 years. So I think of it more as, instead of covering breadth, they're trying to also go with depth in order to enhance the education of the students going through the system. So trying to decongest it. And then, as others said, preparing students for higher education. Right now, a lot of colleges are feeling that they're spending the first year doing a lot of remediation for students that are coming in, and they believe that by adding a couple of years, that some of the remediation will be compensated for. And preparing students for the labor forces we have talked about, and then complying with international standards. You mentioned that it's the only country in Southeast Asia that does not have a K-12 system. It's only one of 3 countries in the world. Do you know the other 2?
Angola. And I can't say the name of the other African country.
Yep, Djibouti.
Djibouti.
So it looks like DJ. You have seen it written. So Djibouti, Angola, and the Philippines are the only 3 countries in the world that have a 10-year basic education system. However, if you look, these are some countries in Southeast Asia. You will see that there's a difference between a basic education cycle and a pre-university education cycle. And so you'll notice that, for example, Singapore has 11 years of a basic education cycle. However, to attend university, they would have to attend another 2 to 3 years of education, 1 to 3 years of education in order to enroll in the university. So it would be, in essence, in saying that the senior high school component would be optional for university-bound students. So that's in essence what some countries do. There's a compulsory component of the basic education, so these would be considered compulsory, but then there are additional years if you are pre-university. So that's the difference there.
I have a question. So, how do you compare the university graduates of the Philippines from that of the other countries in Asia? So, how would you compare them?
Compare them in terms of
The final result in the college level. How would you compare them?
Do you mean compare in terms of their aptitude?
Engineering, let us say they graduate of Brunei to that of the Philippines, how would you compare? They have 12 years.
Yeah,
And so, how would you compare their final?
yeah,
Maybe it's math and science skills.
yeah.
You mean their skills?
No, their level of intellectual level,
Capability
their ability
in a
to
particular-
go
No,
to,
just to clarify what you mean by comparing.
yeah, you compare, if let us say, you put them in the same level of how they work, how would they compare?
To other.
What she's
That's
saying is the professional Filipinos that are here, who went through 10 years of basic schooling, are doing just as well or even better than some of the people that
Yeah.
are here.
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
what I meant,
Yes, yeah.
coming now at
Yeah.
this level. So how would you compare our graduate to that of the graduates of the other school?
Yes, and I'm actually, let me jump ahead, because what I want to suggest is that a key aspect of not just elementary secondary cycle, but of the tertiary college level, is quality of education. And there is a difference between quantity and quality. And there was a study, this last one here, Felipe and Porio. Felipe was a professor at UP and a former deputy minister of education in the Philippines. And Porio worked at the Fund for Assistance of Private Education. She was the executive director. But they conducted a study in 2010, and they were looking at the international test. Have you heard of the TIMSS test?
No.
So it's a comparative test that they look at results across
Math and
several
science.
countries, and the TIMSS is for math and science. And so what they were doing is they wanted to see, does the length of education matter? And so they were looking at like the sub-cycles. So they were looking at countries that had 6 years of elementary versus 4 years of elementary versus 8 years of elementary, and then doing the same for like high school. And their conclusion was that there were countries that had lower, in terms of number of years, that had higher results on the TIMSS. But then there were also countries that had more years of education that still scored lower than countries that had less. And so in these other two studies that I have noted here too, the top one suggests that lengthening the learning time does not necessarily lead to better academic performance. And the World Bank study in 2007 said if a school system is of low quality, then it does not pay to keep children in school for longer. And so the reason I point this out is that in my mind, it is much more important to focus on the quality rather than the quantity. And so that, I think, is the challenge. And I believe that people know that, but it's something that I keep returning to that is important in this context too.
Yeah, that's really the whole point. What's the point of prolonging the elementary and the secondary level if the final product is practically the same? So you're just extending, and I don't know if the Philippines has the financial ability to pay for the kindergarten up to the secondary level.
You're providing a fabulous segue for me, but yes, Paul.
I just want to make sure that we keep the questions down to minutes.
Oh,
So
okay.
let's hold them to the end a little bit more.
Sounds good. Well, I was inviting, so.
Because when we get done, we'll have lots of discussion.
Sounds good. Well, I'll keep my, but it's actually a very good segue because one of the primary challenges and that DepEd recognizes as a primary challenge is the funding. And if you probably can't see this, but from 1997 until 2011, the blue line shows the percentage of the national budget that was allocated to the Department of Education. So in 2011, it was about 12.6% of the national budget. The World Bank suggests that in other developing countries, the average is 20%. Okay, the percentage of the GDP that is spent towards the Department of Education was 2.7%, and UNESCO suggests that should be at least 6%. So the Philippines right now is sitting at a 150 billion peso shortage in order to bring, in terms of teachers and classrooms and materials and stuff, there's 150 billion peso shortage. And so when we add K-12, here's the cost estimate for adding senior high schools throughout the country. There are the capital costs, which would be just the initial startup cost of about 44 billion pesos, and then the recurring costs annually for paying for teachers and textbooks and operating expenses that are around 17 billion pesos. And so it's a challenge for sure in order to compensate for the shortage that they're starting from. There are many, to be fair to the other side as well, those in DepEd are saying that they are addressing the shortages and that they believe by adding the extra 2 years of education that they're also going to be receiving more funding from organizations and that are going to support them because of the endeavor to add the extra 2 years. It remains to be seen, of course, So we shall see. The other challenge that I think a lot of you are probably thinking about is the challenge of family, the additional family expense. If you look at the bottom in terms of income levels, the bottom 30% of income levels in the Philippines average out to spend about 60% of their income on food, and only about 1.2% on education. And so by adding an additional 2 years, it really increases the burden on those families in terms of their ability to pay. Even though it is free education, because that's a common argument, well, it's free, but we have to consider uniforms, transportation, supplies, and the opportunity cost, because for those 2 years that they are attending school, they're also not making money for their family. So these are some challenges that are being addressed right now in the Philippines too. So I believe it's a really tough situation, because I believe that I believe that there is promise in offering a K-12 system that is internationally compatible, but it really, to me, comes down to that quality issue, and that you can have as much quantity as you want, but the quality always outweighs it. And I believe that that's really where the focus needs to be in order to increase the education system in the Philippines. So I'm going to make you do some more work now. Language of instruction. You can just shout out. You don't have to raise your hands. What language was used for instruction in your elementary school?
English.
For all of you in the Philippines as well? English. What about Filipino? Tagalog? As a subject, but English was primarily used, okay? What language is currently used in elementary schools in the Philippines? Filipino.
Depends upon which school. Depends on which school.
It depends on the region.
And the region. The dialect. What about in grade 1? Anybody know what the
Mother tongue.
mother tongue?
Mother tongue.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, if you're the right mother tongue, isn't it? I mean, if you're a minor language, then you don't have mother tongue.
Yeah. Mother tongue is a very problematic term because what is the mother tongue? And language is very fluid, and so how do you differentiate one mother tongue from another? And so, and if you have 10 mother tongues in a classroom, which mother tongue do you utilize?
And if you're Manobo or something like small group,
Or what resources? And is it even a written language? It's full of challenges. This is why I was fascinated to do this research, because I wanted to learn how this was going to work. What language do you think should be used for instruction?
English.
And Tagalog.
And Tagalog. So the former approach of the bilingual